Okay, so welcome everybody. It's the final class for Eddie's course for Tupten Norbu Ling and co-hosted by Lungri Tangpa Sena, sister centres across the great oceans. So Eddie, I will spotlight you and take it away.
Fantastic, thank you, Ricky. Well, hi everybody, and welcome along to this course primarily about equanimity, how to develop it, how useful it is to even think of it, I think. Let's begin. So by everybody getting comfortable in their seats. So please adjust your posture until your back is straight and your shoulders are relaxed. And when you are in this relaxed posture, allow the body to breathe itself. And with each inhalation and exhalation, there will be a movement taking place. And I would like you to be aware of that movement and what it feels like. And the purpose for doing this is to allow the body and the mind to relax, and the mind, while it is relaxed, to be focused. And being focused, you can recognize the feelings and movements taking place within the body as you breathe normally and naturally. And while you are breathing normally and naturally, it's easy to imagine the presence of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, the deities and the Dharma protectors, the Arahats, and every other form of spiritual being in the space above you. And they're here to help us look after ourselves, to put an end to our suffering, and to develop all of our good qualities so that we can help others do the same. So what we're going to do is to take refuge in this vast field of merit so that we can have greater wisdom, greater compassion, and much greater skills in working with ourselves and others. So let's take refuge in the field of merit in front of us, this vast refuge field. So reciting along with me. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. In response to this prayer, lights and nectars pour forth from the heart of the Buddha, and they wash over you, and they remove every obstacle to having devotion to a teacher, having faith in the Dharma, and have the confidence to rely upon a spiritual community. And having these impediments removed, we recollect the kindness of all sentient beings. And we wish that all sentient beings have happiness and its causes. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and its causes. May all sentient beings never be separated from the happiness that is without suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from the bias of attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. And in response to this aspiration of ours, lights and nectars pour forth from the heart of the Buddha. They wash over us and over all the beings surrounding us. And every obstacle or hindrance that we might have that obstructs our ability to be kind towards others, to have compassion for them, to rejoice in their happiness. Every form of bias that we have is removed, washed away in the light and nectar. And we and others find ourselves established within these four immeasurable thoughts. So again, we petition the refuge field, saying, reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since the beginning of this time, and rejoice in the meritable, holy, and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of psychic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own and others' merits to the great enlightenment. We've created some virtue, so to prevent any clinging to that virtue or clinging to any sort of idea we have, we're going to imagine that through the power of emptiness, everything is transformed into a wonderful pure land, which we're going to offer to the Buddha and the spiritual companions. So reciting with me, this ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this is the Buddha field of offer. But may all living beings enjoy this pure land. Yidam Guru Ratma Mandala Kamnayatayami. The offering is accepted by the Buddha, and he smiles at us with delight. And we look up into his eyes, and we feel accepted and at ease. Then an emanation of the Buddha leaves his heart, travels through space, and comes to rest above the crown of your head. It's facing in the same direction you are. The emanation descends, entering the crown of your head and coming down through your body to rest at the level of your heart, whereby its radiance begins to expand, filling your body and mind with light. And the light goes out through the pores of your skin and begins to fill the 10 directions of space. And all beings existing within space are utterly transformed, reappearing in a fully awakened state. And you see that there are no differences between you and anyone else. And you rest in this great equanimity. And then the light begins to withdraw from the 10 directions of space, and it re-enters your heart. You can feel yourself breathing, and you know that you're sitting on your seat. And you understand that this visualization has been accomplished on the level of imagination and has placed upon your mind an imprint, a cause to bring about your own enlightenment for the benefit of others. And to acknowledge that with a sense of joy, and then breathe in deeply through your nostrils, and exhale through your mouth, and allow your eyes to blink open and to move your body in whichever way you'd like to. If you feel at ease and comfortable in your seat in front of the screen. So welcome again to the class. So this is our fourth teaching on this topic. So we have covered some material already. We looked in our first class at the different types of equanimity. In brief, they were the equanimity of feeling, the virtuous factor, mental factor of equanimity that we can develop in meditation itself, and immeasurable equanimity. We also briefly looked at the functions of each of these phenomena, and then we looked at how everything is sort of uncertain. And this is what we have in common with us, with each other. And we looked at this, what we call mere equanimity. So this is the equanimity that's practiced like friends, enemies, and strangers. We also had a look at the idea of being the same, and then the uncommon Mahayana equanimity, which we looked at last week. So to help me present the material, and my major sources are from these books here. So it's a very, they're all useful. They've all got something good to say about this topic. And these books here, the middle one is Buddhism, and Samsara Nirvana in Buddha Nature and in Praise of Great Compassion, three books in a wonderful series called The Library of Wisdom and Compassion. And yeah, if you get a chance to, at least have a read of them. I think you'll really enjoy them. This book up here called Widening the Circle of Love has got a lot of very brief meditations in them that are very useful. And I relied a lot on that in our second class. Today, we're going to do this like a very, very brief review. Then we'll look at equanimity from the deepest point of view. We'll move on to equanimity in Tantra, and then look at the possibility of freedom and how we all have this possibility that we're all equal in this way. So I'm going to begin with a quote from great Bodhisattva Shantideva. This is taken from his Bodhisattva's Way of Life. He says here, I should eliminate the suffering of others because it is suffering, just like my own suffering. I should take care of others because they are sentient beings, just as I am a sentient being. So this sort of sums up what we've covered. And it's a sort of a conclusion that you draw for yourself through your study. Now, once you see that everybody is the same, that you are the same as everyone else, and there isn't anyone that wants even the slightest form of suffering, and no one's really content with the happiness they have. So, and as others outnumber us vastly, we should work just as hard for them as we do for ourselves. And so, like, why? So because we're all sentient beings, we're equal like that. And as sentient beings, we equally suffer and we equally wish to be happy. I really should make an attempt to put what I know into practice, help others as much as I help myself. And what we've been going through is these two different forms of impartiality or awakening. And this is the first one. A feeling of equal emotion regarding others. And here what we're trying to do is to overcome the emotional reactions of attachment and animosity that we often have with respect to friends and enemies. So we really want to have a sort of an unbiased openness for these other groups of people. And to do that, we meditate on the 6 causes and 1 effect. That helps to do that. The other meditation is the one that we're going to complete today. This part called equalizing self with others. And what we're trying to do here is to generate a feeling that there's actually no difference between ourselves and others. Again, another quote from Deva and from the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. He says, look, when happiness is equally dear to others and myself, what is so special about me that I strive after happiness for myself alone? They're really wonderful questions to ask of ourselves, aren't they?
Eddie, a lot of those questions and this quote that you've just read, it features in various movies, doesn't it, where people actually come to this conclusion. It's a natural conclusion where you kind of realize, you know, why am I putting myself separately from others? We're all human beings.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a pity that we can only do it like sometimes. You know, and I think, and that's because this bias interferes that we, you know, keep going over towards the friends and the enemies and so forth. So now last week we looked at this here from the relative point of view. Remember, we looked from the point of view of others and from our own point of view. And it was sort of like, we were sort of to train our mind in this attitude, sort of where we no longer discriminate between ourselves and others. And we're trying to train ourselves to not be intolerant towards others' happiness, trying to always find ways to decrease their suffering. And today we're really looking at what's called the deepest point of view. And again, in here, there are 3 points to consider and a conclusion that comes from them. Let's begin by looking at these from the deepest point of view. So we begin by asking ourselves, are there any true enemies in the real sense of the word? So that, you know, when something is true, it can't change. It can't be, you know, good today and bad tomorrow, or my enemy is a bad guy today. They've been hurting me today. I really don't like them, and that's going to stay the same. Now, the Buddhas do not see that, and I'm sure with a little bit of thinking, we will not see that either. You know, all of us have had misunderstandings with people we've called friends or strangers, and we might have started off with some sort of dislike towards them, and even might have thought, you know, these people are really bad people. But something could change. Either they do something that changes our mind, or something from our side, and then suddenly they're no longer true enemies. So the conclusion to draw from this question, are there any true enemies? You know, in the real sense of the word, is like there aren't. There are no true enemies. So I think
So
this is
Eddie,
really to
yeah,
yep.
there's just a real quick one for this. When I was overseas and I found that fellow English speakers suddenly were my friends, though I'd never ever spend any time with them if I was with them in Australia. Like, no way, man. But when there's only like 2 of you and you've got to figure out which train to get, and you're both English speakers, suddenly it's like, oh, my buddy.
That's right. They move straight off from strangers to friends, isn't it?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
if they, you might not like something about them, at least you can talk to one another. Yeah. So we've got to draw this idea that to stop um, holding on to the bad behaviors of persons and sort of pushing them together and say, well, this person's a bad person and I don't like them. And to always see them as being bad people. So remember that a few years ago, on the street where the centre used to be, one time I think Miffy was coming home and the whole street was locked off. And then later on, we found out that a man had killed his wife and children. And it was broadcast over the news at the time. And
actually, it was just
later on was written about, and so one of the persons who'd heard the story on the news, sort of live reported, had said, men who do this or people who kill their wives and children should be killed themselves. They're just like animals or wild beasts. And so she could ring into the radio station and say, talk, and so that's what she'd done. And then she found out it was their son. And she couldn't hold the two ideas in her mind that her son could be this wild beast and should be locked up forever, and yet he was her son. And what she could remember of her son was probably many of the kindnesses and all the good things about him. And so her response to this was, no, it couldn't be his fault. It's not, it can't be his fault. It must have been the fault of his wife. So once I see this idea of, quickly going like terrible, horrible person, and then you change your mind. Just like that, you go like, what? Because it's my son.
And Eddie, it really shows too how just flipping from one person's fault to another person's fault isn't actually the answer either. It's like each time it can't be the person's fault, it has to be the delusion's fault, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And this is where, the fault has to be put where it belongs. And if it's not the person, and as, I've said this before, and it was great to read that when the Buddha says, when he looks at the vast run of all sentient beings, he doesn't find faulty sentient beings. He says what he finds is sentient beings with mind, with a mind which is under the control of karma and delusion. And that's where the fault lies. So we need to understand or try and bring it into our lives. There are enemies that exist but in mere name. They're just conventionalities, but they're not truly enemies. Now the second one is to ask ourselves, it really ties into the second one. Are our enemies like permanent? Will they remain as enemies, or is that changeable? So, so I'll put this picture up here of ex-President Trump. Good thing I've got my right-hand person, isn't it? Otherwise I go, oh my God, what do I do?
The funny thing was that, just like 15 minutes ago, I'm like, Eddie, have you done your voice exercises? And he's like, shut up, don't talk to me. And now suddenly I'm your friend.
I didn't think that must have been last week. So our enemies, of course, are not permanent. I think, we know this, I think, but it's not so easy to stop behaving as if they were.
So you're going to tell us why you put up Trump and Kim Jong-il or whoever he is?
Yeah, so for many, many years, America and North Korea have been seen as enemies towards one another. So whenever we get press about the North Koreans, it's always put across like that, like they're the bad guys. And I'm sure from the North Korean perspective, it's Trump and the Western world that are the bad guys. They're the enemies of their country. So they both look upon each other with suspicion. And as you can see here, though, they're shaking hands. And Trump was sort of saying, that's because of me. I made the move. But it comes from this idea, of course, that enemies don't remain the same forever. In fact, nothing does. There isn't anything that remains the same forever other than Buddhahood and true cessations. They're really stable, but everything else is not. So when I read this a little while ago, that really struck me. I was like, oh, of course, like, duh. Like, your body is undergoing constant change, your mind is undergoing constant change, the world around you is undergoing constant change. That means everything is not permanent. So to think that any sort of relationship that we might have would be permanent, well, we're just wrong, aren't we? Yeah, which is a really nice thing in a way, especially when it relates to enemies, because then enemies could become more neutral and then even move on to get have friendly relationships with them. So we have the two things, there are no true enemies and enemies are not permanent. Enemies don't truly exist and they're not permanent. So if something did truly exist, it would be permanent. They're not true, they don't truly exist, and enemies are not permanent. And now we come to the third section. And basically this is sort of saying that self and others are dependent designations. So like, what does this mean? And why have I sort of put this picture up? Well, I've put this picture up because we have two cliffs. One on the right, one on the left, and there's a gap in the sky in the middle and some water in the middle. And on one side, if you were standing there, you'd say, I'm standing on this side. And if there's anyone on the other side, they're on the other side. But for the people on the other side, they're saying, no, I'm standing on this side and you guys are on the other side. And it's the same with you and I. If we were standing, as we are, we're talking to one another right now, right? So I am talking to you. But if you talk to me, then you are I talking to the other. Right? So it's not like this is a real stable sort of thing. It's not that we're so different, like two different colors, like blue and yellow. Right? So if one side is blue and the other is yellow, the yellow can't become the blue, and the blue can't become the yellow. They're just completely different colors. Right? But you and I, it's different, isn't it? From your perspective, you are I, and I am you. And from my perspective, I am I, and you are you.
And I mean, this is actually a lot to do with how we're even hosting this class today, because is it us or is it over there? Is it in Australia or is it in America? And who's us and who's over there? Well, it depends who's listening, doesn't it?
Well, it really depends upon the name. So self and others are just names, right? And they arise dependently. So the name for me is called I, and the name for you is also called I, isn't it? And they're just sort of like names, and they actually are, because if you look beneath the name for the referent of the name, meaning, when I look for I don't find it. I don't find it, something called I that now I'm calling I. What I find is a body and a mind that I'm calling I, and you will too. But if you look through your body and mind for something called I, that is, called I, an I that is called I, we don't find anything like that. So we just, designations. A designation is just a name. I and others are from the deepest point of view, just names put onto a basis for that name, which in our case is the body and mind. And in this case over here, when I'm standing on this cliff and I'm looking at that cliff, if I investigate all the way through all the particles of this cliff, I'm not going to find this. And all we find, oh, it's just the name I've given to where I am right now. But if I was to walk across to the other cliff, now I'm on this cliff. I get another name. Miffy.
Yeah, it reminds me of this amazing James Baldwin quote where he said, "I am black only so long as you think you are white."
That's right. Exactly. That's right. Yeah. So this is the deepest point of view from the conventional side. You know, conventionally, I am here and you are there. And conventionally, you are where you are at, and I am over there. This is just how things actually exist. And so I hope you can sort of see how knowing that enemies are not true and they're not permanent, and that they don't truly exist or inherently exist, existing from their own side. This is what this idea of being a dependent designation shows you. The thing doesn't exist from its own side. The enemy does not exist from its own side. The friend does not exist from their own side. But they're called friends. They're called enemies. And that's how things conventionally exist. But to hold on to them or grasp them as if they're more than just the name, we're making a mistake.
Eddie, that reminds me of something I read about World War I, which was when some of the soldiers on the front, the German soldiers and maybe it was the French, instead of fighting and killing each other, they would reach a point where they actually started yelling at each other across the frontier, whatever, and sharing cigarettes and being friends with each other, because that war dragged on endlessly and people forgot what it was even for. And so near the end, there were instances like that actually happened.
Yeah, that's right, Susan. So you're more seeing as brothers or human beings, right? That share things in common. And one of the great things they were sharing at that time, of course, was just the suffering of the war, and that you could actually share something with each other.
Yeah.
And you find this is the case all the time. This is what when governments try to encourage others to go to war, they have to drop this idea of being dependent designations. They try and make the enemies much more real than what they are.
Much more real and also less human. So the enemies get all those, dehumanize and turn them into demons. And so then, there isn't that resonance of how can I do this to another human being?
Yeah. So in conclusion to this material, we come up with this idea that, actually I can't find any justification at all to hold a grudge against someone who causes me harm. That being the case, I have to overcome biased feelings I have towards them. And ignoring disinterest in their welfare, decide to not neglect them. You're in the first verse of eight verses of the thought translation. I shall hold them near. That was it. Whenever I'm being determined to accomplish the greatest of all sentient beings, I'll understand their needs. I understand their needs. I always hold them dear, because you understand their needs. And so what the need of a human being, of any being with consciousness, is to be happy and avoid the suffering they go through. So, we're not disinterested in that about ourselves. We're very interested in being happier people and experiencing less suffering. And as this whole presentation shows, say, well, you know what, Eddie, everybody's just like you. I've had a number of times I've asked anyone in the class, would anybody here like to experience a little bit of suffering? And no one puts their hand up. You go, yeah, I'm the same, mate. I don't want any. And how about a little more happiness? Oh, yeah. We'll have a little more of that. So we're all putting our hands up, for that one, and none of us puts our hands up for the other one. And so, we don't neglect ourselves in terms of our search for happiness and our wish to be free from suffering. So it's like, okay, so like that first quote of Shanti Davison, so why do you just work for yourself when you're all the same? This we've got to sort of end up and trying to act on it. So in summary, this is the quality of all beings. No? So everyone equally wants to avoid suffering. Everyone equally wishes to be happy, but everyone equally lacks genuine happiness. And these next couple of points lead us into the next section we're going to be talking about. So we all lack happiness, a genuine happiness, and this is because the causes for suffering still remain. So our happiness is not stable. Causes of suffering can be eliminated, and the potential for this genuine happiness, genuine complete happiness, can be actualized. And this goes right across the board for all beings with consciousness. Now, of course, it's not saying that, like, I have a dog, they have the potential for complete happiness. You go, yep. Can they put an end to their suffering? Yep. Right now, no. We would have to say no. But overall, in the big picture, if we're talking about what happiness is, what suffering is, and realize, wow, it's mental. It just comes about from an undisciplined mind. Suffering comes from the undisciplined mind. Happiness from a mind that's disciplined. Dogs, any other form of a human being, that's very difficult for. So in other words, they need to change their body. Basically, you've got to go through another rebirth. So some of you might remember the story of the person who became the Buddha when he found himself in the hell realm, and he tried to assist one of his compatriots there, who was also in the hell realms. So he went to assist him. Well, he was immediately killed.
Just stop the share for a moment.
And found himself elsewhere. So it was only because he was elsewhere that he could actually put an end, or try to put an end to his suffering. Like it couldn't be done in the hell realms. He couldn't achieve enlightenment in the hell realms, and neither could anyone else. So really he found himself rebirth in one, I think it was the God realms, and then come down to the human realms, and it's much easier. So you need the right basis, and then you need more than that also. You need a lot of assistance.
And also, Eddie, often people will say, well, humans aren't the most intelligent creatures on the planet. Dolphins are supposed to be more intelligent than us, and there's certainly animals that are, have far more acute sight or acute, navigation systems. But in terms of human beings, it's like we're the ones that can set up schools and hospitals and educate ourselves, whereas dolphins can't actually educate themselves about anything other than being a dolphin.
Yeah, that's right. And even for many humans too, isn't it? It's very difficult. If you wish to become enlightened or engage in the spiritual journey, not only do you need to be human, you need to have the leisure and opportunities to do it, the freedom to do it. And
and
many
be able
of the
to,
supports are needed, the conditions are needed.
all the conditions have the opportunity to be able to read, for instance. It'd be so hard to study if you couldn't read.
You know, and as many of you know, I'm pretty sure all of you are readers, yet it's not enough, is it? You know, not only do you need to be able to read, you've actually got to meet authentic spiritual aspirants and have genuine appreciation of them, so that we can actually say, wow, somebody's, you know, not only the historical Buddha did it, but there are actually people doing it right now. You know, that the techniques are there, the methods are there, the ways of helping us understand so we don't make mistakes. There are people there that can help us. So we need, you know, it's a wonderful thing to be to have the human body, so we have a human mind, but more is required. And if we have, you know, what's called the 8 freedoms and the 10 endowments, you know, boy, please take advantage of them. Oh, where am I up to now? The equality of all beings, wasn't it? That's where I finished off. Okay, so
Yep. That's right.
I'm just getting funny things on my phone. So, okay, so what makes liberation and enlightenment possible and freedom from suffering possible is really just mind itself, because we have mind. So any being with a mind, with a consciousness, that potential is there. And that goes right across the board. So that's why I'm saying, you know, we're equal in that way. So let's have a see why that might be the case. So there's the mind and the nature of that mind, and then there's afflictive mental states. So I want to just say a few things about that. So, you know, these afflictive mental states, so, an affliction has so these 2 facets, right? So we have a consciousness, primary consciousness, mental consciousness, which is clarity and knowing. That's what it does, is to know. The mind knows things. Its nature is to be clear, meaning it's non-physical, and it has this capacity to reflect the knowledge. Then we have this mental factor, and that pollutes it, meaning that what you know is not known correctly. So this picture here is actually a picture of oil spread out across water. So while the oil is on the water, we can't, you know, the oil is always like it's polluting the water. And while it pollutes the water, we can't get to the water. Well, we can't see the nature of the water. We don't know that the water is actually clear and clean and so forth, because it's not, while the mental factor pollutes it. So the question is, you know, can these mental factors that pollute consciousness be removed? And there's, you know, and so we come to this conclusion, well, just as, you know, oil can be removed from the water, and the clarity of the water can be known to us, it's the same thing with the mind, with consciousness. This is what I found really interesting, and I'd just like to share it with you. So this comes from Samsara, Nirvana, and Buddha Nature. It's on page 283. So it says here, according to the perspective of the Sutra vehicles, which is where this stuff's mainly coming from the viewpoint that the primary consciousness and the mental factor of anger are concomitant in that single mental event. it is said that both are defiled. So we have the mental factor defiled, anger, and then the mind becomes defiled because what happens. Just like here, we've got this thing that's like, wow, the water's completely polluted. The oil's gone like all the way through it. It's on the surface and it's all the way through it. And so from the Sutra perspective, that's how they talk about how the mental factors affect the mind. But he says, however, this is not the whole picture, because anger can be extracted, just like the oil can be extracted. When anger is counteracted, the clear and the cognizant consciousness remains. This consciousness is not defiled, and its continuity can go on to awakening, since clarity and cognizance, or clarity and knowing, are also the nature of the awakened mind. The consciousness that is clear and knowing is said to be pure, while a mental state of anger, which cannot continue to awakening, is afflictive and adventitious. So, if we look at our own experiences, when you're angry, do you have clear cognizance of what's going on around you? We don't, hey? The mind's obscured by the anger. We don't see the objects clearly. In fact, I remember one of the things that His Holiness said, that's the worst thing it does. It prevents your capacity to reason, to see things clearly. We say, I saw red. You sort of say, like, I lost it. My mind wasn't engaged with the object properly. And yet, there's plenty of times when we're not angry. Right? So now we see the objects properly as they actually are, but without the overlay of the anger. Now we might see the person, the person's just suffering. They're just having a really hard time. And then we have this compassion for them. But like I say, so that brings us back to the clarity again. And we can know the object in a much more reasonable way, in a valid way. Which raises this question, right? So is liberation possible? So I'll just say a couple of things before put the points up. So it's saying that with disturbing emotions and wrong views,
just stop the share for a moment.
I just really don't want to. At the moment, it's not going to take long. So disturbing emotions and wrong views are called afflictions because when they arise in the mind, they afflict us and disturb our mental peace. In addition, they motivate us to do actions that disturb and afflict the peace of others. Fortunately, these afflictions can be removed, enabling us to attain liberation. True state of peace does not fluctuate according to external circumstances. Now, several factors make liberation possible. And these are the factors. One, the basic nature of the mind is pure. We just touched on that with the oil and the water. Secondly, the afflictions are adventitious. So just like the oil can be removed from the water, these mental factors can be removed from the mind. It's the nature of the mind, just like the oil is of the nature of the water. And it's possible to cultivate powerful antidotes. Now, if it weren't possible to cultivate powerful antidotes to remove the oil from the water would always be polluted. And it's the same idea here. If it were not possible to cultivate powerful antidotes, enlightenment and liberation would not be possible. So if anyone has attained liberation or enlightenment, it's showing us, wow, the afflictions are not of the nature of the mind. They can be removed, and these people have done it. Miffy, yep.
So this really points it out to me that it's not our ordinary sense of self that becomes liberated, because often we can think, oh, there's no way I'm going to be able to get liberated, with all my faults, and we feel it's impossible. But that's because it's not our ordinary sense of self burdened with afflictions that gets liberated. We get liberated from that self, isn't it?
Yeah, it just depends upon what you mean by the ordinary sense of self. So the ordinary sense of self in general that we have is the wrong sense of self. We all believe in a type of self that doesn't exist. That's the ordinary. That's one of the ways of looking at ordinary sense of self. But there's another way of looking at the ordinary sense of self, which is like the self that says, look, I'm just going shopping. I'll just go and pick this up. Right? That's also an ordinary sense of self. And that self actually exists. And we don't need to get rid of that. It's when that ordinary sense of self that says, look, I really like to get enlightened. When ignorance focuses on that self and so that ordinary sense of self, the one that actually does exist, takes on the extraordinary appearance of truly existing, of inherently existing. That's the wrong one. So that can get rid of, and then we just leave ourselves with, like you're saying, the ordinary sense of self. I've become enlightened. I'm helping others to become enlightened. The Buddha used the term I. When he talked about himself in personal pronoun. That's fine. And bodhisattvas will too. You're not grasping at the ordinary self to be something extraordinary. You don't need to get rid of the ordinary me. So that's all one side. But like I said, once it's misapprehended, trouble. And so it's not so much the I that we need to get rid of, it's the ignorance that's misapprehending the I. That's what we've got to get rid of. That's the problem. So what I've done is just put up a few slides of these 3 points. The basic nature of the mind is pure. So again, I brought up the idea of this, dirt in a glass of water isn't the nature of the water. And the dirt can be removed and the water returns to its clear state. So we all know this. And, I was just thinking that's a similar type of thing where, if we just leave the glass alone, don't shake it. Many times over time, the dirt will sink to the bottom and then the clarity is shown again. But any movement of the glass, up comes the dirt again. So to me, this is a nice analogy or metaphor for the idea of when you are in a state of calm abiding. Right? So you've concentrated the mind. So all the dirt just goes to the bottom and you just keep on a virtuous state of mind, or the mind itself, whatever the object is. But it's not polluted by the dirt. But as soon as your mind comes off it, and something happens, your mind becomes polluted again. Now you've got troubles again. So
Excuse me, Ed.
Yep, Sue, yep.
I've always got a little bit stuck when people say the basic nature of the mind is good. Have you read that? I heard, pure I understand, but I've always, or positive, I get stuck. And is it because...
from a sutra perspective, Sue, you'd say, no, it's neutral.
That's just better.
And then all the good qualities could be developed on that state of neutrality. That's the sutra point of view. And then a tantra point of view, you could say, then you could actually turn the neutral state of mind into something positive. But just to say that it's positive right from the get-go, like it's good, you have to talk to them a bit more about it.
That's good, because every time I hear that, I get jarring, and I just thought, is it just me? Yeah. Rinpoche used a nice word the other day. He said the basic nature of the mind is honest.
Wow, is it? Yeah. Oh, yeah, that is nice. Honest. Yeah, that's lovely.
I think the other connotation of the good nature of the mind is that when we're in a state of equilibrium, so when all that dirt isn't all shook up, then naturally we tend towards virtue and kindness. And it's only when we've got the disturbing emotions and the reactivity happening that we, because of that distortion, that we act badly. And I found this just on a really basic level when I was working in a call center and ringing people up, for those surveys. And when I first started, I just thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to have the horrors because everyone's going to hang up on me and hate me and I can't handle rejection. But what I found, Sue, was that most times, most people, because you catch them at a neutral time, they just try and help you. And that's their automatic response. And it blew my mind. It was so profound to actually just see it again and again. So, and I think it's because, like what Eddie said, of that neutrality, then from that you can build something positive. But because of the neutrality, something positive comes out automatically. Anyway, that was my take on it.
Thank you.
So I'm just thinking of how they might be using the word good. Like, are they using it in terms of, they might be using it one way, but you're hearing it another way. Because the word good, you could say, is a noun, verb, or adjective.
Oh.
How are you hearing it? And then how might they be using it?
Okay. What's the difference, Eddie? What's good as a noun, verb, and an adjective? I always thought it was just probably.
What do you think?
Basic mind of the nature, the mind is good. That's an adjective, isn't it?
Well, so that's how you're hearing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what you're flinching against, eh?
Yes.
Yeah. So you can go, okay, so could be something else. Verb, like it's good, is that in some way. Have a look, so grab a dictionary and pull those three out and go, okay, then I'll just turn it to it. See, this is where I'm flinching, but this is what it could also refer to.
Okay, thanks.
You've got a lot to work with, haven't you? Miffy's ideas, my ideas. Yeah. Okay, now the second point is that the afflictions are adventitious. So what this means is that they've not penetrated the basic nature of the mind. In other words, adventitious means that they come and they go. So as I can, you're all here, I imagine that none of you are very angry at the moment. So, you go, why not? You said, well, basically the causes and conditions aren't there, are they? Something hasn't happened, so so that we become angry. Now, if the affliction actually penetrated the nature of the mind, it would always be there. It's just like if oil had penetrated the water, it doesn't matter what you did to the water, there'd be oil there. You can't get rid of the oil. And this is like saying, well, we can't get rid of afflictions because they've actually penetrated this basic nature of the mind. Now, so I often call the basic nature of mind is what's called clear light. So the clarity can refer to the impermanence of it, the changeable nature of it, its ability to reflect and know, and then the light is like empty. So in other words, being empty, then these two things can't come together and be the same, mind and the affliction. They can't be one and the same entity. So saying they're empty means that they're dependent. So the clear nature of the mind requires different conditions for it to be afflicted. And those conditions are adventitious. They're not always there. And that's why you're not all sitting there really grumpy faced and angry, because if it was always there, we all would be. So thirdly, it's possible to cultivate powerful antidotes. Why? Because afflictions do not rest on a valid foundation. They can all be overcome. So I put this picture up because there's this analogy that Nagarjuna uses. So in the times of the Buddha, and even now, so you have asbestos. Right? So these are, I know these are asbestos suits, but this is the idea. So when fire burns on asbestos, it's never burning the asbestos. What it burns is any dirt on the asbestos. So the dirt is burnt off, but the suit stays the same. So it's the same with the mind, right? So the mind, the afflictions of the mind are burnt off through the antidote of emptiness, direct perceptions of emptiness. It's overcoming the dirt of the mind grasping at the afflictions to be inherent in nature. We have these two forces. Here's like the fire burning off the dirt, the suit remains the same. The antidotes burn off, get rid of the afflictions, and the mind just stays the same. The mind always retains its natural entity, clarity, knowing, and empty. Now, there are three reasons why. So this is showing you why the afflictions aren't of the nature of mind, right? And how you can actually get rid of them. And like I said, primarily this is because of the nature of mind itself, and then the different antidotes you can use to rid the mind of the afflictions. So that's a great thing to know. But on the flip side of it is all the excellent qualities of mind can be cultivated limitlessly. So that's a tremendous thing. So the clear and cognizant nature of the mind is a stable basis for the cultivation of excellent qualities. It's stable because it never changes. It's always the same. Secondly, the mind can actually be habituated to excellent qualities that can be built up over time, gradually, cumulatively. Gosh, I'm a little shy of saying that word in case I got all stuck. And thirdly, excellent qualities can be enhanced, but never diminished by reasoning and wisdom. Now, this comes from Dharmakirti in his commentary on reliable cognition. So in that he explains why it's possible to cultivate the mind's excellent qualities limitlessly and to transform the ordinary mind into a Buddha's fully awakened mind. So I'll put up each of these now and we'll just say something about them. So it says here, the clear and cognizant nature of the mind is a stable basis for the cultivation of excellent qualities. So it is firm and continual, and there is nothing that can bring it to an end. So here, of course, this is the mind that they call the beginningless and endless mind. The very subtle mind that's the basis of all the other types of consciousness. So then they give these examples. So if you continuously boil water, it'll dry up and nothing will remain. So there's no basis for boiling water like forever, limitlessly, without limit. So excellent qualities cannot be cultivated limitlessly on an unstable basis, such as the physical body, for instance, anything physical. Because in terms of the body can fall ill, it will age, and it will eventually die. So for those people who spend a lot of time building up the body and their health and all these things, I mean, it's not a bad thing to do. It's a very useful thing to do. But it's not the basis to develop all your good qualities, because as I say, all of us age, we're all susceptible to illness, and all of us die. So we can only build the body up within its limits. But the mind is different. So the more we train the mind in excellent qualities, the more you can enhance those qualities until, in a sense, they're perfected in Buddhahood itself. Secondly, the mind can be habituated to excellent qualities. They can be built up like gradually. We don't have to begin anew each time we focus on developing them. So again, they use an example to contrast it against the body and the mind. So it says that a person who's engaged in athletics can't develop their ability limitlessly. You've always got to keep putting more energy into it. And of course, many times you go, we can't do anymore. Like, I've got too old, my body's slower, others are faster, all these things, you can't do it. But the nature of the mind is different. The quality from the energy from cultivating a quality one day remains. So if that same quality is cultivated the next day, it builds on what was previously accomplished. You don't have to reestablish it. You don't need to exert the same degree of energy. But from our perspective, it does require consistent training on our part. Otherwise, our spiritual muscles get weak. But if you practice regularly, then the energy can be directed to enhancing the excellent qualities until they become so familiar that these qualities become natural and spontaneous. I remember a story about a Dharma practitioner who was afflicted with Alzheimer's. But what was really noticeable about him was so he couldn't recall so much of what he understood and learned and everything. Right? What remained was his kindness. Right? So I thought, wow, isn't that wonderful? And so excellent qualities can be enhanced, and they always will be if you keep, building up with proper reasons and wisdom. They'll never be diminished by that. If they were diminished, they're already on a false basis, and that's exactly what you want them to do. We really want to be relying on something reliable. So here from Samsara Nirvana in Buddha Nature on page 282, it says, constructive attitudes and emotions have a valid support in reasoning and wisdom. They can never be harmed by the wisdom realizing emptiness. Compassion, faith, integrity, generosity, concentration, and all other excellent qualities can be cultivated together with wisdom, and in fact are enhanced with wisdom. So it's really for this reason that these qualities can be really built up extensively until having all the qualities of Buddhahood. So I'll just pause here for a moment, because we're going to next go into the equanimity in terms of Tantra. Is there anything anybody would like to say about this, or query or anything like that? You feel good about it? You feel good about knowing what's possible? I hope so. If not, get that Samsara Nirvana and Buddha Nature book. It's like the clearest that I've seen it in one place, and the reasons that support it. Which basically I've sort of read out, but there's other material there that will also support your confidence in it. Okay, so we'll move on.
Eddie, yes, it is comforting to know that the mind can be habituated. It's a great comfort to know that.
Yeah, the thing is, isn't it, Sue? Most of us habituate the mind with things that are probably best not to habituate it with. Like the idea that we just build up a habit, that's a process of habituation. So, we should habituate the mind to good things, to virtue, since it leads to happiness, and habituate ourselves to restraining the mind from non-virtuous things.
And Eddie, to a degree, we've already, in this life, we've brought our habituations with us. So the fact that we're interested in the Dharma and, sincere about it, that's also, we've already done a huge amount of habituation. So isn't it? So...
Yeah, past habituation has done that, isn't it? And isn't it the case that sometimes, like before you become a Buddhist, maybe just the first reading of it or the first thing somebody said, and it just struck you with, that's it. That you go like, so how many people do that? It's not all that many. The possibility is there, but if you find yourself doing that, you go, my mind has been habituated to this before, because otherwise it wouldn't find it so easy to go, oh wow.
Or pleasant, we wouldn't find it so enjoyable.
No, that's right. And agreeable. So this is your pointing out, Miffy. And not only that, just the fact that we're human beings with leisure and the opportunity to engage in it is also come out through habituation. So obviously we can habituate the mind. It's the process of training, isn't it? Study and so forth. Yeah, but like you say, Susan, I think it's easy to forget that we get habituated to goodness. Alicia, you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask what we can do to make sure that in the next life where we meet the Dharma again. Like I feel like it's just like doing what we're doing right now, but I just wanted to kind of check in on that.
Yeah, I think to do what we're doing now, just what do you call it? We're just trying to become a little better at it. As this, to over time, to get better, to put more time in, to become more joyous about it, to have more conviction in it, and then from that conviction, act on it. So to prepare for the next life is like, well, do it now. That's how you prepare, isn't it? Here we are. Let's go.
Yeah.
There's a really nice practice with the water bowl offering. So when you put the water bowls down, you put them fairly close together, and in your mind you're thinking, in each of my lifetimes, so there's the continuity of mind that goes from the water from bowl to bowl. In each of my lifetimes, may I always be this close to my guru. So it's, you've got the clarity of the water, like the clarity of the mind, the fact that it's completely still, so so that the mind without all of the agitation of the adventitious afflictions, and the continuity of the water from the bowl to bowl. May I always be this close to my guru. So you're always thinking of it, not just this life, but every single life until enlightenment.
Okay, so let's have a look now at the 4 immeasurables in terms of Tantra. So I've just used these 2 tantras, the Chakra Samvara, and the next one is the Yamantaka Tantra. And both of them have the 4 immeasurables in them. So it's often refuge, and then 4 immeasurables, and then some of the other practices. So here, This is the one from Chakrasambhara. It says, may all sentient beings come to hold the special sublime bliss. So of the four immeasurables, which one do you think this one is? Anyone? Miffy?
Equanimity.
Joy, rejoicing,
One?
joyousness. Sue said equanimity. I
Okay.
say joyousness.
Yeah. So this first one is what we normally call like loving kindness, the thing of love. We all seem to be freed from dukkha and its causes. Well, we all know that one. What's that one? Immeasurable
Passion.
compassion. That's good. May all sentient beings never be separated from the bliss of liberation. That's got to be the joy, isn't it? And finally, we have, may all sentient beings be free from afflictions and their associated defilements. So I'll just briefly go through it. So the first line is love, but here the happiness we wish for all beings is the special, sublime bliss that arises in tantric practice and is used to realize emptiness. Then we come to the third one, may all sentient beings never be separated from the bliss of liberation. So the tantric meaning of empathic joy is like the meaning in the general Mahayana. That is, it's not simply rejoicing in others' worldly well-being, but wishing them to have the bliss of liberation, which here means like full awakening. But may they all have the bliss of full awakening. And the final one is, for all of this to come about, their being free from afflictions is essential. Thus, equanimity is wanting them to be free from afflictions and their associated defilements through the generation of bodhicitta, the realization of emptiness, and this deity yoga. And in terms of the Yamataka Sadhana, this is, may all sentient beings be endowed with bliss. May all sentient beings never be parted from dukkha. Sorry, may all sentient beings be parted from dukkha. May all sentient beings never be parted from bliss. And the final one, may all sentient beings be placed in a state of equanimity, unperturbed by preconceptions of apprehend and apprehended, or by the eight worldly concerns. So when I first read this, I really liked this one here, and I really wanted to switch it around and put it into the, the normal four immeasurables. I just really love this unperturbed by
It's great, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really meaty, isn't it?
Excuse me, Eddie.
Yes, Sue?
Bliss. I've heard
okay.
I've heard harmonious space, bodhicitta, or just immense pleasure. Does it apply on the context of what bliss is?
Yeah, oh, for sure. Definitely.
So in this case, on this one.
Okay, so bring up the three other types of the things that you said before, Sue. They were
harmonious space.
Harmonious
space.
Space.
Yes, that was from Geshe Sopa's, I think, commentary, his short commentary on the Yamataka Sadhana. This was harmonious.
That's referring
space.
to what? And what's that referring to? You're saying that's the
bliss is harmonious space.
Okay. The next one.
Bodhicitta, or just extreme. The last one I thought was
type of bodhicitta, though. The explanation of it requires some difference. And the last one.
Okay. Extreme pleasure.
Extreme pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So each of them would require some unpacking.
And also, just to add to the mix, there's two mentions of the word bliss here, but they're probably referring to different things in this prayer.
So the first one, right? So So, so we're going to talk about the equanimity section of it. Note this last bit: may all sentient beings be placed in a state of equanimity, unperturbed by preconceptions of apprehension, or by that Buddha concerns. This is in the Yamataka Sadhana. The four immeasurables are expressed like this. The equanimity here includes like two wishes, as you can see. The first, that sentient beings be unperturbed by preconceptions of apprehender and apprehended, is the wish that they realize emptiness directly. Now, but how that's done, this is where, major differences between the tantric perspective and the sutra perspective. So here, what's realizing emptiness is a very subtle mind. But that subtle mind is conjoined with bliss. Is when the absence of inherent existence is known non-conceptually, there is no appearance whatsoever of an apprehending mind and an apprehending object, an apprehended object. That is, emptiness is perceived non-dually, without any feeling that I am perceiving emptiness. It's said that the subject, the mind realizing emptiness, and the object, the emptiness of inherent existence, being apprehended, are experienced inseparably like water poured into water. Since Yamataka is the wrathful form of Manjushri, who's the Buddha of wisdom, immeasurable equanimity wants all sentient beings to attain that liberating wisdom, emptiness. Like I said before, the emptiness, the method for realizing emptiness is different in Highest Yoga Tantra than the techniques that are below it. Now, the second wish associated with equanimity is that all sentient beings be free from the 8 worldly concerns. Attachment or aversion regarding material gain, praise and blame, pleasure and pain. So now, while these 8 worldly concerns and methods to subdue them are taught early in the stages of the path, they are difficult to counteract while our body and mind are in the desire realm. While meditative absorption suppresses them, it cannot eradicate them completely from the mind. Only the wisdom directly realizing emptiness can do it. So, wishing that sentient beings be free from delight regarding money and possessions, praise and approval, reputation and image, and pleasant sense objects, and free from dejection when confronting poverty, blame, and disapproval, notoriety and a bad reputation, and unpleasant sense experiences, is wishing that they have this supreme wisdom.
So it is this like taking it's like a common problem across the spectrum, but the Highest Yoga Tantra takes like the top shelf antidote for it.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, and so they mentioned something here about they are difficult to counteract while our body and mind are in the desire realm. So if you've done a little bit of study on this, or if you've had teachings on it, you'll know that to have a wisdom that perceptually realizes emptiness requires you to have a mind of calm abiding. Now, calm abiding is not a mind of the desire realm. Okay, so now you've got emptiness, the mind is not the desire realm, you have this emptiness. There isn't a conceptual emptiness working, is it the normal mind, even though it is finely focused on emptiness, is that the mind that we're using here? And the answer is no. because that's a gross type of mind. So what, as any of you who've got high yoga tantric initiations or have had teachings on them, you're using a subtle mind. So that subtle mind is only gained through you drawing the winds from the other two channels and putting them into the central channel. And that's where the bliss arises. And now you have a mind that actually realizes the emptiness is conjoined with the bliss. Right? And that is getting at the object called emptiness. Well, that's very different, right, than the previous techniques. It's what does Lamayeshi say? Like an atom bomb, considered to the normal way that, where we are at present, trying to use our conceptions, our ordinary mind to understand emptiness and then to meditate on it. So if you look at us, it's like, well, no, there's probably no bliss there. So we have to imagine it. Imagine it being blissful, imagine that way. And if you're practicing these tantric sadhanas, that's what they say, isn't it? Yeah, we don't have the bliss, so we have to imagine it. The bliss of our is like conceptual.
So we're still habituating ourselves at least to the process of it.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, even that. Yeah, that's right. And it's a bit like what's the analogy they use of what am I saying? When pilots they don't actually fly the plane, but they hop into those
Flight simulator.
That's right. So that's what we're doing, right? At present. It's like, yeah, we're not actually in the jet. Right? We're not competent enough. So, but we can imagine it. And so that's what the sadhana is. Like here's what to imagine. Now imagine you are this enlightened. And it's a wonderful state. It's completely blissful. So we have to, and you don't look like this. So we have to change our appearance and so forth.
So this is like a really supercharged equanimity.
Yeah, in fact, like the last equanimity seemed like the equanimity where it's the emptiness. It's equanimity that all things are like, water poured into water. Is all whatever the phenomena are, it's all the same. They're all empty. And that mind that experiences that is a mind that's blissful. So Sue, in regard to your questions about the bliss, I would suggest that as many lamas do, they try and use different sorts of analogies or different phrases that will resonate with us, with the students. And what happens is that when you hear them, you think, oh, that's like this, but in fact, it might not be like that. That's why it requires questioning the teacher.
Okay, thank you.
So where are we up to?
We're up to the conclusion.
Wow. Yes, may they all be endowed with bliss. So what's our takeaway? Well, today we learned about equanimity from the deepest point of view. And those the last 3 points of the 9-point meditation, where we looked at from the point of others, from the point of view of self, and from the deepest point of view. Today we just looked at the deepest point of view. We also looked at equanimity from the point of view of Tantra. And also I tried to bring upon the idea of equanimity from the sort of Buddha nature point of view. That because we all possess a mind, we're all mind possessors. And the nature of that mind is to be clear and knowing. We're all the same like that. And there's two potentials there. One is to remove the afflictions from the mind, and the other is to develop all the good qualities. And that's just because of the nature of mind. If we have a mind, we're the same like that. So, which leads us to our dedication of merit. So thinking that everything that we've listened to has been a dependent arising, and therefore it's empty and exists in mere name. We'll take everything that we've listened to and talked about and thought about and dedicate it to enlightenment for the benefit of others. So thinking or reciting, due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel, bodhicitta, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline but increase forevermore. And as long as space endures and as long as sentient beings abide, may I too remain to dispel the sorrows of the world. Indeedy, indeedy. Well, we've come to the end for a little while, and I hope to see you again. Let's all stay alive as long as possible. Let's keep generating virtuous thoughts and try to help ourselves and others. And thank you very much for attending the course.
And thank you, Eddie, and thank you everybody for coming along. So the Tupten Norbu Ling classes on this time slot will continue for us in Australia every Monday lunchtime, and for America it's every Sunday night. And Eddie will probably have a couple more classes in the new year, a couple of courses coming up in the first term of the new year. So stay tuned and take care, everyone.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you very much.
you.
Very much.